We could have killed you. Maybe you should have.
The Last of Us Part 2 promises a blend of stealth and savagery not seen before from a Naughty Dog game. Having now played it for myself, it's clear to me just how much the combat system has evolved when compared to the original, not to mention how dynamic each fight can be. There's a brutality yet fragility to each engagement that make them a thrill to negotiate, but also intrinsically linked to the larger themes at play. Staying hidden and striking from the shadows is heavily encouraged at the beginning of any encounter. Tall grass is often Ellie's best friend, although it doesn't make her completely invisible to enemies. The AI are smart, let them get too close, and even if you're lying down motionless, they'll spot you. And bad news often follows. Being proactive and constantly on the move proved successful for me, as I bypassed some enemies before ultimately having to strike. In my time of The Last of Us Part 2 so far, I've discovered that if one thing is for certain, it's violence. It doesn't want you to necessarily play it like a traditional stealth game, but actively engage in the action and become a violent participant in its world. Even the silent kills speak loudly through violence, as Ellie stabs enemies in the neck as the camera hangs on both of their strained facial expressions. Her victims' eyelids poetically making their final few flutters next to the butterfly now tattooed on Ellie's forearm. A familiar but more streamlined crafting menu that offers many more options than the first game directly influences your chosen playstyle. I found the new pistol silencers particularly useful, but kept reminding myself that they only last for 3 bullets at a time. The gunplay in Part 2 feels majorly improved on the previous game's efforts, with every pull of the trigger feeling hefty and purposeful. The way damage is inflicted on you is also more pronounced. Get spotted against the brown cloth-clad scars, and a well-placed arrow may be fired into Ellie's right shoulder. You'll have to tear it out of a grimacing Ellie to prevent the damage it will cause over time, but those few seconds that it grinds her to a halt for will allow for her hunters to surround her. It's a desperate scenario that The Last of Us Part 2 seems to relish putting you in again and again and again. You get a real sense of the impact as Ellie when you're shot in The Last of Us Part 2. Shots leave you temporarily incapacitated and struggling to get back onto your feet. The heavier the caliber of ammunition, the bigger the fall as well. It's another improvement on the original that further makes each encounter feel genuinely life-threatening. Quick Throw is an ability that uses an object to temporarily stagger enemies, allowing you a brief window to go in for a kill. It's particularly useful when faced with onrushing infected. More on them later. It's equally effective on human enemies though, if you want to get in close and sink a melee weapon into them. The sound design adds extra weight to these actions as you feel and hear flesh being unpleasantly hacked into. After clearing an area, a freshly blood-soaked Ellie is now free to scan for any items that will aid her in the next battle, then clamber down to the next arena where a new set of threats patrol, and so begins the violent cycle again. Crucially, each of these encounters feels different to the last. Sometimes you just don't have the resources to go toe-to-toe firepower-wise, forcing you to slowly and silently take each enemy down one by one. The biggest variable though are the enemy types themselves. In the roughly hour-long section I can discuss here, I fought 2 different human enemy factions. The aforementioned mysterious Scars, who favour crippling bows and arrows and heavy melee weaponry. Coming up against these axe or sledgehammer wielders provide moments for the vastly improved melee combat system to shine. For a series of well-timed dodges and strikes, you can eventually get the better of your opponent. They're often bruising affairs where you feel every punishing blow. The other human enemy group, known as the Wolves, favour guns and utilise attack dogs that sniff you out by following your scent. You can distract the dogs, or if you can put your conscience to one side, eliminate them, making your life a lot easier. Again, I cannot stress how unpleasant a lot of this is. Most unpleasant of all though are the infected that roam the city. Even the previously tame runners seem a lot more threatening than before, and require a good few punches into their fungal flesh to take down. The Stalkers also make their return after briefly appearing in the first game, and are more terrifying than ever. A near silent enemy that doesn't show up when using listening mode, and hunt you down in enclosed spaces. Enemy encounters are frequent, but it's credit to Naughty Dog that each one feels different to the last, whether that be down to the variety in enemy type, items at your disposal, or your chosen playstyle. Every fight feels dynamic. You can go in with a plan, but you have to quickly think on your feet as Ellie's cover is blown or a new threat enters the scene. The combat of The Last of Us Part 2 is constantly rotating between heart-pounding tension and brutal butchery, and forms a circle of violence that is wholly unpleasant, but necessary for the story that it's trying to tell.